Jeremy Doku is Man City's latest signing. A team obsessed with control and ball retention is signing a pacey direct winger for around £50 million. On the surface level, the signing shouldn't work. It's been well documented that Guardiola prefers wide players who are cautious, whose priority is to hold on to and keep the ball. It's one of the reasons why Grealish was one of Pep's most important players last season. Jeremy Doku, on the other hand, seems to break that mold of player. By the end of this video, you'll appreciate why Doku does suit Man City, how he improves City's options in attack, and how his unique offensive threat will get even more out of our creative players. Before we analyse Doku, let's just establish Pep's general winger philosophy. The system that won the treble last season was the 3-2-5 or 3-2-2-3 shape. By pushing a defender forward into midfield, you get more bodies in the middle of the pitch compared to the opposition. If you have numerical superiority in midfield, you have a greater chance of controlling the midfield, and therefore the game. The key word there is control. Guardiola is a man obsessed with control. Why? Because less control of a football match and riskier offensive play means you're more likely to lose the ball, which means you're more vulnerable to opposition counterattacks, more likely to concede a greater number of chances. More chances conceded equals more goals conceded. And this is why Pep's moved away from pacey direct wingers, who are more likely to engage in risky offensive actions, such as attempting to take on and dribble past a defender. Think of Sterling and Sane. Grealish, Mahrez and Bernardo, on the other hand, are wingers who retain control. They are safer options when compared to a direct winger, and are fantastic at slowing down the pace of the game to suit City. So with all that being said, the Doku signing appears to be a contradiction, because this guy is quick, ridiculously quick. His pace is one of his biggest weapons when it comes to taking on and beating players, particularly his explosiveness and acceleration from a standing start. With that comes a directness and a willingness to dribble past players currently absent from City's squad. And yet, the signing does make sense, despite the control caveat I outlined earlier. Because whilst taking on an opposition player is a high-risk strategy, and Doku loves to do this at Rem, being in the top 1% for attempted take-ons and successful take-ons, his dribbling and natural ability to ride challenges is of such a high standard that he rarely fails a take-on relative to other wingers across Europe. His stocky frame is incredibly beneficial in this regard, and 61% of his take-ons are successful. That might not sound great instinctively, but it is really impressive. In fact, it places Doku in the top 1% of wingers across Europe. Naturally, it's therefore a much healthier success rate when compared to City's more conservative wingers from last season. And also, it trumps our direct wingers of the past. In the 18-19 season, Sterling and Sane, who were unreal wingers that year by the way, were successfully taking on players 54% of the time. So Doku not only attempts more take-ons, he completes more take-ons. This quality therefore mitigates the natural risk of dribbling past players, and he's a profile of player currently missing at City. I think that's really important. Control is obviously essential for Pep, but sometimes control isn't enough. Sometimes you need an alternative, because following the departure of Sterling, we currently have no wide players who are naturally inclined to run at, take on and terrify opposition defenders with their pace. An alternative option in attack makes City less one-dimensional and less predictable. And he's also not too quick for his own good. When you're as pacey as Doku is, it's very easy to lose control of the ball, but his close control is incredibly impressive, especially considering the monstrous speeds he can hit when running with the ball. However, to say Doku's just a pacey direct winger would be a huge disservice to him. There's far more to his game than just running and dribbling. So what is his play style? Well, at Rennes he often played at right wing. He's naturally right-footed, but he's also very comfortable with his weaker left foot, and that makes him very hard to defend against, because having the ability to go both ways means a defender can't take the risk of gambling and predicting what Doku will do. Couple that with his explosive pace from a standing start, and you're left with a defender's worst nightmare. Another string to Doku's bow is his ability to play on either wing. He's perfectly comfortable as a left winger, meaning he's adept at going either way, on either wing, cutting aside from the left, the right, running to the byline and crossing with either foot on either side. It doesn't really matter to Doku, and that versatility is going to be priceless to Guardiola, as is his creativity, which is heavily underrated. When it comes to playmaking, he's not a throwback winger who solely runs and crosses. His passes into the penalty area are extremely dangerous, and he's fantastic at creating chances. His assist numbers might not seem impressive, but his expected assists and chance creation metrics are brilliant. In a more clinical team like City, I predict his productivity to skyrocket relative to what we've seen so far at Rem. And he's not reckless with the ball, and it isn't the sort of player to take on a defender at every opportunity. He's also more than happy to play safe, sensible passes when building up against a low block. The way he plays, it sort of reminds me of one of my favourite City players. You can actually see his shirt behind me. Not just a quick winger who can dribble and cross, but a goal threat, a chance creator, and someone with the tools to go either way on either wing. In my Guardiola analysis video, I suggested that he was a combination of Laporte and Ake. And Doku's similar in that he seems to be a middle ground between our direct wingers of the past, Sterling and Sane, and our more control-based wingers from last season, Grealish and Mahrez. Potentially the perfect mix of winger for Pep's City. He's also no stranger to carrying the ball and progressing his team up the pitch. He loves to receive the ball high and wide, and I think this in particular is where we'll see Doku's presence benefit the overall attacking threat of the team. In recent games for City, we've seen Kyle Walker used basically as a right winger when we have the ball. Now, Walker would often find himself in acres of space, isolated on that right-hand side. But the issue is, it's not 2017 anymore. Nowadays, Walker is associated with being a defensively solid player, as opposed to the lethal attacking fullback he used to be. This meant our right winger would be getting into good positions, but we weren't necessarily able to capitalise on it as frequently as we perhaps should have done. If Doku is played on the right and receives the ball with a similar amount of space, that spells disaster for opposition defenders. When we're counter-attacking and want to play over the top, or if we need to go long to beat a high press, Doku's pace and movement means just one pass from someone like Ederson can lead to a goal-scoring opportunity. It means the likes of Foden, now playing centrally in midfield, has another willing runner. And it's now not just Haaland who will stretch opposition defences. It's another vertical player who likes to play up and down rather than side to side. His presence alone could act like a magnet to defenders, creating space for his teammates. Now, does all this mean Doku's the perfect player? No, obviously not. He's only 21, is an incredibly raw player, and his end product does need to improve. Ligue 1 isn't the level of the Premier League, so naturally there's going to be a pretty steep learning curve. It's also very unlikely that Pep's going to allow Doku to dribble for City as much as he did for Rennes. Doku's going to have to rein that in a bit. Pep's coaching of him will no doubt focus on decision-making improvements to avoid too many turnovers of possession. So how is Doku going to be used for City, and what does it mean for Cole Palmer? Well, in the first instance, I don't see Doku immediately coming into the side and locking down a starting place. Injuries aside, the first choice right wing and left wing spots belong to Bernardo and Grealish respectively. Let's also not forget that no winger under Guardiola has thrived in their first season. Grealish, Sterling, Sane, Mahrez all required one season under Pep to get used to his system and philosophy. I think it's more likely Doku's used as an impact sub for his first few games whilst he gets up to speed with his new teammates and his new playstyle expectations. The good thing about that is there'll be plenty of minutes for him, given he can play either wing. It's particularly helpful for the left wing, considering that Foden's being used centrally this season as opposed to on the left. So when Grealish needs to be rested, Doku can take his place and Foden can continue to play through the middle. The elephant in the room takes the form of Cole Palmer, who shined in both the Community Shield and the Super Cup playing on the right. Sadly, the worst thing about the Doku signing is that it's almost definitely awful news for Palmer, who I genuinely think could make it as a Man City player if given consistent chances. Doku's arrival might take up almost all of Palmer's minutes at right wing. The only way that doesn't happen is if Pep wants to use Doku primarily as a backup left winger. I'd love Palmer to stay, but at this stage in his career, he needs consistent game time. There's also a slight worry regarding Doku's injury history, but City's medical team have a pretty good track record when it comes to mitigating these issues. Haaland's a perfect example of that, so I'm hopeful it's not going to be too detrimental. Man City signing Doku might appear to be a contradiction. Someone like Elise may have been a more obvious choice, but it's clear that this is an exciting, raw player who can be moulded by Guardiola into one of the most dangerous and fearless wingers in the world. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you especially to my wonderful supporters on Patreon who allow me to make videos like these. Shout out to Miz, Kante and DR. Make sure you are subscribed to my YouTube channel so you never miss another video.